Hello, everyone. I'm Helen Wang. I'm the creator and instructor of the course named Leading with Emotional Intelligence. And I created this course in 2018 and started teaching the Executive MBA program, which is a quarter-long course at the UC San Diego's Rady School of Management. I don't know about your childhood dream. If people ask me when I was 5 years old, what do you want it to be when you grow up? I think a teacher or writer may be on top of my list. But never I had a dream to be a chief supply chain officer. I don't even know what supply chain was back then. And I don't even think a chief supply chain officer as a thing existed back then. So my career started with Foxconn in Fullerton, California, back in 2003, which is a pivotal year when computers were still manufactured in the US. Outsourcing was the mainstream strategy back then. Foxconn still produced about 2/3 of the world's computers, but no longer in the US. I led a project to take over Apple's last US factory in Sacramento. Within 3 months, I was promoted to lead the entire procurement team. When I asked what sets me apart, my vice president at Foxconn highlighted my ability to execute by removing roadblocks and overcoming obstacles. I became a superstar in the company. 2 years later, Apple recruited me. I worked with my engineering team on a very challenging project codenamed Grape. I did not realize what we had been working on until Steve Jobs announced the iPhone in January 2007. The iPhone demand always exceeded supply, driving the need for global supply chain expansion. I traveled extensively and led numerous projects to make the globalization happen. I was quickly promoted again to the leadership team. When I asked what set me apart, the vice president of operation at Apple highlighted my strength in collaborating with the engineering team, my effective partnership with the global supply chain, and my creativity in solving problems. In 2013, Google invited me to join the Moonshot Factory, which is the Google's secret lab focused on groundbreaking products. I built an unconventional team to design supply chains for innovative products such as Google Glass, self-driving cars, smart contact lenses, and internet balloons. When creating something from scratch, vision is the key. I shared my philosophy during an interview with an industry magazine. Any problem can be solved when vision, strategy, and execution work together as a system. After a very exciting career in high-tech industry, I made the bold decision to transition from a corporate executive to an entrepreneur. Today, I wear multiple hats. I'm a consultant, I'm a board member, a professor, and a founder and CEO of Oceanside Perspective, a nonprofit educational organization. Throughout my journey, problem solving has been my superpower. As a lifelong learner, I practice what I teach and teach what I practice. This is why I created the course, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. How do we solve complex problems? I created a simple framework, a 3-step approach that I wanted to share with you. The first step is assuming you know where you stand, which is the point A, and hopefully you also know where you're trying to be, which is the point B. Point B representing a solution that solved the problem. But between A and B, plenty of unknowns, risks, a lot of confusions in terms of how do we get there. That's the first step, to identify where you are, where you want it to be. The second step is, after analyzing the situation you are in, hopefully you're able to develop viable options. A pool of options will get you from A to B. Any of those options will get you there, but each option might present different pros and cons. So after weighing the pros and cons, and the final decision will be made. Decision-making and execution is the last step. So what it takes to solve a problem, the first one, knowing where you want it to be, is a vision. Vision is a leadership trait. And developing multiple options to get to where you want it to be is what we usually say strategy. What it takes to formulate a good strategy, the bigger the problem is, the more complex the problem is, the higher stake decision needs to be made here. It takes a lot of creativity and an innovative approach. And oftentimes, it takes the right technology to make it happen. The last step here is execution. Almost nothing happened according to the plan. So there's always problem happening, right? So it takes a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of adjustment. It takes flexibility to get to the point B. And I would emphasize that throughout the execution, new problem is going to encounter. So this is a repetitive process from step 1 to 3. And it takes a lot of entrepreneurial mindset and a spirit to make things happen. I would like to give a few examples and emphasize the viable option. What does that really mean? I mean, it's literally a pool of viable options. If you imagine the situation as a swimming pool, right? You have a slow lane, you have a faster lane, but you also have a lane probably people don't care about the swimming. They just want to chat and having fun. All 3 lanes will get you from point A to point B. But that's what I mean. It has different pros and cons, and it depends on the situation, depends on the company. Some solution is better than the other. And another example I think is going to give us a profound imagination of this idea is the Google Map. I did the search that you wanted to go from San Diego to San Francisco. And Google Map mapped out 3 options here, right? All 3 options is going to take you there. You could take, here is Highway 15. You could also take Highway 1, and there's another option of Highway 5. And in this particular case, Google made a recommendation to take Highway 5 because I wanted to get to the destination, which is San Francisco, the fastest way I could, right? So that's the recommendation Google made based on my particular situation. This is what I mean by a pool of viable strategies. And the step 2, creating this pool of strategy, is the most critical ones because most of us might not get to make the final decision, but we are the one contributing value by analyzing the situation and present different strategies. But what takes to be a good problem solver, even if you know the methodology, we can learn more skills, but what exactly the skill we should learn? So when it comes to skills, it generally speaking has 2 big categories. One is what we call hard skill. Hard skills is objective, and it utilizes our logic center, and it is also commonly known as IQ. And when I say it's objective, for example, writing or math skill, financial modeling, language, those are the skills you can actually take a class. You can take a test, and you can assess your ability, how much you have mastered that skill, right? And subject matter, it included a lot of different hard skills in order for you to become a subject matter expert. But the other skills category is soft skills. Soft skills are subjective, and it utilizes our emotional center, and people often refer to it as an EQ. That including skills, for example, like interpersonal skills, leadership, problem solving, and creativity. As you can imagine, to solve a complex problem, it will take both hard skills and soft skills. And we all have certain level of IQ and EQ. I oftentimes guide my students looking into a 2x2 framework. So if you envision your future, will work more with product, that's where you really wanted to focus on hard skills, because you wanted to become a subject matter of that particular field. That's important, right? The hard skills is highly valued in those fields. But if you envision yourself in the future, will work more with people, that's where you wanted to reflect in terms of the ability of your soft skills and how could you acquire more soft skills. And soft skills takes a long time. It's a lifetime learning for us. So the earlier that you could start, the better. And then what separates the exceptional problem solver? I want to push this idea further. assuming we all have some level of IQ, right, which provides us a mental ability, a speed and a capacity and a working memories. We all have certain level of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence help us to perceive, control, and express emotions. It also acts as a buffer to stress and anxiety. And it's a key ingredient of interpersonal skills, and it enables us to be more entrepreneurial. Is that enough? How does the best problem solver differentiate themselves from others? I would emphasize curiosity. Curiosity brings us a hungry mind. So we're always eager to learn. We're very open-minded. For the complex problem we're talking about, there is more ambiguity. Curiosity is also our best friend. Why do I say they're our best friend? Because we all had that, right? We grow up with curiosity. When we were young, when we were kids, we asked a lot of questions. But after we grow up, we were expected to know all the answer, right? If we don't know those answers, we're going to fail in school tests. So we must know. So curiosity become a very scarce commodity. So now to learn soft skills and to become a good problem solver, remember to bring your best friend when you're trying to solve a problem. So how does IQ and EQ advance our career? If you look at the rock at the bottom, those represent as your hard skills. What school I went to, what degree I have, what certificate I do. Those are the ones you put on your resume. And those are the resumes presented to the hiring manager. So hard skills can get you into the door to get a job. But soft skills oftentimes is the one differentiate the top candidates from an average ones. Soft skill is also a strong indicator for better performance. And a better performance lead to career advancement. So I would even go further, say soft skill, if you practice enough, if you enhance your soft skill, it could become a soft power. But how to elevate soft skills to soft power? There is really no shortcut. And we have to learn, have to practice personal intelligence. This is a fundamental system that I'm used to design the class. It's a system designed by the social scientists. It has 3 layers. From bottom to the top, the first layer is human nature. Those are the universal, commonly shared mental programming among all the human beings. They are biological features. The second group are culture. Culture is very specific to groups, their learned behavior. The third layer, which is also the top layer, is personality. Personality is specific to individuals, and they're inherited and learned. We're going to talk a lot more about the first level for this personal intelligence module, which highlighted individuality, differentiation among all of us. So those are based on specific genetic makeup and personal experiences. For example, are you more emotional or stable? Are you extrovert or introvert? Are you sociable or not? What are some of your special interests? Those are the things that influenced us and shaped who we are. Knowing that we are all different, if I ask you the question, who are you? Oh, it's a very complex question to answer, right? Because are you talking about me now? Are you talking about me in a professional setting? Are you talking about me, in my personal life? Are you talking about me as a mother? Are you talking about me as a professor, right? We are multifaceted. We're very, very complex as a human being. So how do we better understand ourselves? Is there a tool to do that? Yes, there is. Self-awareness is the tool. What is the self-awareness? Self-awareness includes the value, the passion, aspiration, and fitness with our environment, impact on others, and the reactions, including our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, strengths, and weaknesses. Self-awareness also have 2 types, internal and external self-awareness. What is internal self-awareness? Is how clearly we see ourselves. And internal self-awareness is positively associated with job and happiness, relationship satisfaction, and social control. And it's actually negatively associated with anxiety, stress, and depression. On the other hand, external self-awareness is how correctly we understand how others see us. We are familiar with the phrase, right? Perception is reality. Regardless your own intention, it's what other people's perspective becomes the reality. External self-awareness is positively associated with empathy and perspective taking. Do we know ourselves? I wanted to kind of run through a few questions, to see like what might be the answer in your mind and what is according to the scientific research. First, the question is, research shows that most people believe they're self-aware. Do you know how many percent the people actually fit the criteria? The answer is actually 10 to 15%. Okay, it's actually quite low. It's probably lower than we thought. The second question, does being high on one type of awareness mean being high on the other? This referring to the internal and external self-awareness we talked about earlier. Well, the answer is not sure. So if you are high on your internal self-awareness, it's not guaranteed that you're high on external and vice versa. It really depends. The third question, when it comes to internal and external self-awareness, which one is more important? They're equally important. Knowing yourself and also knowing the perspective from others. The last question, do people always learn from experience? And does expertise always help people rule out false information? Well, you hear people to say, I've been there, I've done that, I know everything. Well, so actually no, right? As a matter of fact, if that person said that, that's a classic example of lack of self-awareness. So experience not necessarily bring you more self-awareness. We actually have this archetype, which corresponding to one of the questions we answered. The y-axis is internal self-awareness. On the x is the external self-awareness, right? So it's a 2x2 table. If you are low on internal self-awareness, which means that you don't yet know who you are, what do you stand for? At the same time, you're also low on external self-awareness. This is where people usually call seekers. Let's pick another example. Low internal self-awareness, but high external self-awareness. Those are the people we know in our life. They're pleasers because they tend to focusing on appearing a certain way to make other people happy. But they oftentimes overlook what matters to them. So over the time, they tend to make choices that they aren't in the service of their own success or fulfillment. What we want to emphasize here is it's equally important to have internal and external self-awareness. So the aware level is actually we want it to be. And this is where the leaders begin to fully realize the true benefits of self-awareness. They know who they are, but they also wanted to accomplish and seek out the values of others' opinion. And this is where I say you will have to strike a balance act, right? To balance between the internal and external perspective. I thought it was very helpful for internal self-awareness is what we call the strengths profile. And I provided a website if you're interested. What happens is you basically take an online assessment. It's about like 20 minutes, answer a bunch of questions. At the end of that assessment, they're going to send you a report. And a report is going to put all of your strengths into 4 categories. The first category is realize strengths. So what is realized strengths is the strengths that you oftentimes use, and every time you use it, you enjoy it. Okay, use wisely if you have the realized strengths. The second category is unrealized strengths. Unrealized strengths is you have the strengths with you, however, you don't have an opportunity or you don't remember to use them, right? But every time you use them, you also enjoy them. So the advice from the tool is to use more of that. The third category we call learned behaviors. Learned behaviors are things you do really well. People thinking that might be your strengths, only yourself know every time you do it, it drains your energy. You feel tired. The last category is weakness. So weakness are the things that you find hard, So you're not good at it, you don't enjoy it. And the insight of the tool is going to give to you is use more of your strength, minimize and use less of your weaknesses, and only use your learned behavior when it's needed. But this is an excellent tool to help you to increase internal self-awareness. What about external self-awareness? We have another tool. If you look at the picture here, well, it's about a number. Is that a 6 or is that 9? So it depends, right? If you are the person on the left-hand side, you see 6. If you're the person on the right-hand side, you see 9. Is that 6 or is that 9? Well, it depends, right? Whose point of view and whose perspective and which position you are in. Same analysis happened to here, right? Is that 3 or 4? I mean, again, it depends. So what do we call this is a perspective taking. Is the ability to look beyond your own point of view so that you can consider someone else may think or feel about something. But in order to do this successfully, you have to understand other people's thoughts, feelings, motivations, and intentions, right? It's easy to say, but hard to do. How do you actually do that? We have a few suggestions. One is when you watch movie and when you read fictions, right? You actually get more perspective because the book or the movie actually prevailed more perspective from all different characters. You understand what they're thinking, why they do what they do, right? So that's a way to train you also to be curious about everything has a reason behind it. Should I get to know more about it? Obviously, asking questions is another way, right, to gain more of external perspective. But I found the most powerful tool is the intellectual journal. First of all, journaling itself is a good tool for you to reflect. Whatever happened to me today, how did I get into that situation? If I were to do it again, how would I do differently, right? But intellectual journal takes this to the next level because it's a guided journal exercise, and it helps you to analyze the problem in a much of a depth that would gain more learning from it. In the morning, you're looking into the mirror, looking into yourself, thinking about what can I do better today? If I'm going to solve a problem, what takes for me to solve the problem? I would like to bring a framework here. The first thing is, it takes some skills to solve the problem, right? Maybe a technology, maybe a more innovative approach. So that's a skill level. And I think everybody joining this class would have no problem to learn, more skills, right? To acquire more skills. So that's obvious. But secondly, if you keep acquiring skill, if you keep trying, still not working, it's a time for you to really pause to get feedback. That's where you're trying to get different perspective, right? Why is the problem happening? Why my solution did not work? So it's a time for me to go beyond myself and to get some external self-awareness, to get some feedback, to get different perspective. So once you have the skill, you have different, broader perspective into the problem. This is where you bring up your strengths profile, and you wanted to utilize more of your strengths and utilize less of your weaknesses. And this is a system, sort of an ongoing process to assist you to improve your problem-solving skills. So this is about you, but oftentimes we resolve a problem, we need more than just us, right? So how to improve beyond yourself? This brings us to the next module, which is cultural intelligence. And this is time for me to bring back the structure again. And we are focusing on the second level, right? Which is the culture level specific to groups and all the learned behavior. The culture is based on experience that we share with a particular group. And when we say a group here, it's very broad sense. The group can be a nation. The group can be a certain community. For example, even this cohort, right? The group can be different companies. And the group could be as small as long as 1 + 1. For example, if you have best friend with you together, that can be categorized as a group because you influence each other, you learn from each other. I would name it a groupthink because within a group, you tend to give and take. You tend to learn from each other. You tend to form certain opinion and, thinking alike. And that informs your behavior and action as well. So it's a level of groupthink. But what is a culture? I wanted to go a little deeper with the definition. Here is one. Culture consists of shared mental programs that condition individuals' response to their environment. Culture is shared, is learned, and enduring. And a lot of culture came from historical events. So whatever happened in the past informed the culture and changed the culture. And it's also powerful influence on behavior. And it's systematic and organized. When it comes to value, attitude, and beliefs, those are organized and systematic behavior changes. Most of us grow up with those kind of environment. And culture may be tight or loose. When I mean tight is, in many cultures, you have to reach to 100% agreement. Everybody has to consent. And in some culture, is a lot more diverse and intolerance for differences. So those are more of a loose culture. But here comes the biggest point. Culture are largely invisible. And if I use an analogy of an iceberg, right? You see a very small portion of iceberg above the water. And those represent culture, for example, food. Easily you can tell food differences. We all wear different clothes and styles and all that. Language is different and some physical features. Some people taller, some people shorter. So those are the physical features differences, right? But most of the culture is underneath the water. So for example, the communication styles, the underlying values, social structures, and the ways of thinking. So remember this, culture is largely invisible. And I like to bring another definition that I really like. So culture is defined a way of life of a given society, passed down from one generation to the next, and through learning and experience. So culture is actually intergeneration, and it becomes a tradition of many culture when there's a generational historical event happens. So in this sense, culture is not necessarily good or bad. We can never use simple words like good and bad to describe it. And being all different is okay and shall be cherished because they're just by default different. And then culture is shaped by values, perceptions, assumptions, and expectations, and a lot of our experiences. And culture is just the way it is. In many ways, culture is being referred to as a norm, right? That's just how people do things in that particular environment. So let's explore a few examples of the culture when I say culture in a very broad sense. So first of all, based on the geographic location, history, and the language, there is a global culture clusters. So you feel free to read more of this book, but basically it divided this global culture phenomenon into 10 clusters. And I listed 2 examples just to get us familiar with some of the characteristics of culture and how different they could be. On the left-hand side is Confucian Asia, right? Confucian Asia, including the countries, for example, China, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan. And within this culture, the most obvious characteristics are the culture, behavior, and thoughts are aligned with harmony and benevolence. Relationship and trust are important. If you have to conduct a business within that culture, if you don't have relationship, if you don't build trust, you almost get nothing done. On the right-hand side is Anglo. Anglo including this cluster, including countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, and US, right? So within that culture, in a business context, it's all about creating win-win partnership. It's about a take and give, right? It's about quick win. And it also represents independent spirit. And people has desire for space. So for example, within that culture, you can never ask, how much money do you make, right? It's not a respectful question to ask, and people want their privacy. What's also very interesting is, you see on this side, you have an iconic symbol of chopsticks, right? Chopsticks, you have to use two at the same time. So it's a perfect icon for harmony and trust, right, within that culture. But on the other side, we use fork and knife. And fork and knife actually a symbol for space. So I wanted to utilize this two like iconic symbol for you to resonate in terms of how culture could be different. And as a supply chain profession, you will have a lot of opportunities travel around the globe, just like what I did. And be aware and be very thoughtful when you enter into a different culture. And I also wanted to share my own experience when it comes to different companies, right? As you know, I worked for 3 companies. Those companies actually need no introduction. And they also actually represent a different industry. Like in this case, Foxconn representing contract manufacturing, Apple is a consumer product company, and Google is a search engine software, right, lead in that industry. I gave a few examples here is, for example, if I compare the culture of Apple and Google, very different. An iconic business model they have created is Apple is always closed innovation, right? Their iOS system is closed. They don't open to anyone. And the Android system, which is under Google, is an open source. So that speaks a lot about those companies' differences when it comes to their approach. And when I was around Apple, that Steve Jobs was a sole leader. And we highly emphasize about a laser focus on a very few things, but do it really well. So less is more. But when I was at a Google X, what is Google X? It's a portfolio of startups that they're trying to invest. And it's actually across many, many different industries. So it has a moonshot thinking, but it also is doing more and more is more, right? Because as an investor, you wanted to bet on more opportunities and you want to fail them quickly. Therefore, you can grow your business, what really validated ideas. And what's also very interesting is at Apple, even today, even up to today, Apple, remember, one of the most valuable company in the world, and there's no shortage of profitability, but there's no free lunch. So for everything at Apple, you have to go earn it, right? Do you deserve it? There's no free lunch. But Google, on the other hand, when I worked at Mountain View, Google's headquarters, we have more than 30 restaurants offering different variety of food cuisine. They're all free of charge. So even if you look at Apple and Google as both in a high-tech industry, both are from Silicon Valley, they represent a very different culture. So be aware, if you join a new company, if you're working with a supplier in a different industry, even within the same industry, company carries their own culture. So be thoughtful about that. I also want to emphasize the reality that culture is an evolution, especially when the company grows. You could start with a startup company, which just maybe a family size, less than 10 employees, right? When you adapt company, which means everybody knows everyone, right? You know each other so well, not only professional, maybe also personal level. And things are easy to get it done. There's not a hierarchy, things that you have to go get approval. Then if everything goes well, the company is going to grow. It may grow beyond 10 people. It become tens of employees that become a size of tribe. And then after that, hundreds of employees equivalent to a village size. And then eventually become a city. And if you're really successful, you become a nation as a tens of thousands employees around the globe. So culture also evolve with the company growth in terms of the scale and the people. So corporate culture evolves. It's not a good or bad. It's just the culture must evolve to support the business. And it is your choice and it is everyone's choice whether to adapt or not, whether to grow with the company or not, whether you can, choose to stay or leave. Every time when a company went for IPO or there's a major leadership change, right, that indicates a culture change. And you would see those organizations change people change as well. So those are some of the examples just to trying to get you an idea of where culture comes from when it comes to different groups. So what happens when we encounter different culture? There is a path of intercultural learning, which is very similar to all of us. The first step could be our way is the only way, because that's how I grew up. That's how our company has been doing. And this is how make me successful up to this point, right? My way is the only way. And then come to the awareness level is, wait a minute, there are actually a different way we could do it. And then if you're interested to move forward, then you have more understanding. Oh, that means actually there's a reason behind why people thinking differently and do things differently. There's a reason behind it. And then you come to, it might be okay to be different. Differences to be recognized and respected. And then you eventually go to appreciate, actually, diversity can enhance our lives and even be more fun. And then you do a selective adoption, right? You can pick and choose. What do you like the best? What do you keep? What do you adapt? What do you refuse? Here is interesting thought is, the chopsticks and knife and fork, right? I grew up probably only use, let's say, chopsticks. But then later on, I encountered a fork and knife is actually very helpful, in some situation. I understand, I tried this, and I actually appreciate it. Now I actually use both. It depends. What am I eating? Sometimes I'm eating Asian food, chopsticks is more useful. If I'm eating Western food, I feel like, okay, the knife and forks is much better choice. So when you go to that level, the next level, what we call is multiculturation. This is where we no longer worry about melting pot. And it's just an idea of stir fry. It's like you pick and choose and you decided your strategy, when to use what, and to the best way to utilize, right? All of those. But when we go to a multiculturation level, this is where cultural intelligence happens. So what is cultural intelligence? Cultural intelligence is the capability to be effective in any culture. And they actually have 4 components. The first one is culture CQ drive. CQ drive means, are you interested? Are you confident to carry yourself through a cross-cultural experience? The second one is culture knowledge, is how much do you know about that culture, that which is different from yours? And then after you gain that knowledge, what's your strategy, right? Finally, what action are you going to take? What are you going to learn about it? I would call the first one is motivation, right? You're motivated to learn, to know more. The culture CQ knowledge and strategy is something for you to practice. You probably don't get it right the first time. It's just a learning experience. And then finally, when you take action, you will get a feedback. It either works well or no, it didn't work. You have to try something different, right? So this is an iterative process as well for you to practice and to get better. So those are the cultural intelligence elements I want to highlight. After we learn the differences as an individual, after we also highlight the difference as a specific group, but then your question will be, do we have anything in common? So this brings us to the social intelligence. So we do have a lot of things in common according to this structure, right? The third level, human nature, which is largest, if you're looking at the system, it's emphasizing the commonality we have. And it based on the common biological reactions. For example, hunger, for example, nurturing of young, right? Those are all the emotions that we have. We grew up, we have a lot of influences. So what are some of the source of influences? If you ask people this question, like what shaped who you are today, you will find the answer is pretty similar, right? There are family influences, your parents. A lot of people mention their dad, their mom. Maybe like today, the multimedia, social media, right, environment. I'm sure media also influence a lot of us, our thinking, our behavior, our pattern, right? And the religion is another big source. Community, even education, right, is in a community. So whatever you learn from this program is also going to influence you and shape you to a better version of yourself. So, and your peers, right? So each of those are actually a group, right? Group has its own culture. So collectively, this becomes your society. This is why we call it social intelligence. So within that, it consists of culture, consists of value and beliefs, and then some pattern of behaviors. And how do we describe influence? I researched a few. For example, the first one, in organizations, power often expresses itself as influence. What is power? What is influence? The ability to change, direct, or affect the behaviors of others without ordering or threatening them. I don't think we're living in an environment you can just easily order anyone, right? So in order for you to have a way to influence others, I think the power of influence is the only way to go. The second one is, unlike power, influence can produce an effect without apparent exertion of force or direct command. And then personal impact is about becoming your best self, someone who people in the organization will gravitate towards and be influenced by. Do we all know someone as a center of influence, even if they don't wear the title? They could either be at work or they could also be in your personal life, right? When you have a question, when you have a decision to make, you oftentimes reach out to those people. Why? Oh, because they have this power of influence. And then finally, leadership is being described as an intentional influence. And negotiation is an attempt to influence others to accept your way. So if you circle all of those keywords, right, that gives you an idea of what is the power of influence. So then it brings to the next question, how do we influence each other? I would like to introduce a framework that was developed 2,000 years ago. And it still works very well today. It might work forever. This highlights the commonality that we're looking for as human beings, right? So it goes this way. The first step, if you wanted to influence your audience, okay, is thinking about ethos or characters to gain credibility. In other words, ethos is ethic. So if you want anyone to listen to you, the first question they would ask is, why you? Are you qualified? Do you have enough credibility for me to listen to you, right? So that's the first why. The second one is logos or reason about why people should care about your idea. Whatever you're going to say, why should people care about that? Logos is logical. And it's a question of why about the idea you're about to share. And the third question people would have is pathos. Pathos triggers emotional responses. If you do it right, tell the right story, that people is going to say yes to it. Yeah, emotional resonation, they resonated with the story, right, emotionally. And then the next step, next two steps be the brevity is important. If you say too much, people get lost. So less is more. And if you're able to use metaphor, analogy, that will be a powerful tool. How do you turn words to image? Looking at the screen, have pizza here. If you draw pizza, right, people are much more related to this one with the image versus just a word by itself. But the first three are all whys, right? Why is deeply wired with us. Every time when someone trying to say something, your question is about why. So what makes why such an important question to answer? Because whenever we think, we reason. So if you ever find yourself into a situation that people don't want to listen to you, I want you to pause and reflect. Have you addressed the why? If not, that might be the things that you needed to do, right? Before you go into all the details and the grand ideas that you might want to present. So how to answer why? You have first to know what's important to the other party that you're trying to influence, right? And there are two paths people get to thinking through this why. One is they use their logical judgment. It's conscious. So they will analyze, is benefit greater than cost? Okay, the benefit cost analysis, if it's greater benefits, it's a good idea. So I'm going to listen. I'm going to take action, right? The other one is unconscious. It's almost a conditioned response, right? Those are more like the habit you have. Oh, okay, if I passing by Starbucks, I just want to get a coffee because that's just my habit. I don't even need anyone to convince me, right? I've been doing this every day. And then sometimes it could be environmental pressure. Have you ever been in a case that when you passing by somewhere, you see everybody looking up to looking for something, and that's your first thing is that, let me try to also look, what are they looking for, right? So you don't really think too much, that you just kind of responded to that situation. But in any case, that you always remember to address why to begin with. And I also wanted to introduce a few strategy and technique or skills that you could use to help you to address why. The first one is what we have talked about, the perspective taking. So it is put yourself into others' shoes and then practice perspective taking. Understand what they want from this conversation. If you form a partnership, understand what is important for your partner. And understand what they're looking for and figure out how to give what they want, right? Do you have what they're looking for? The second step I would call unlock the resources, because you must assess what resources you have and then try to unlock more resources beyond. You don't ever lock yourself into that box. You always want to thinking about what resources do I have beyond this particular moment, right? So time is in a dimension. If you're just stuck now, you should thinking about whatever happened in the past. Can I leverage something already happened in the past? What about a future opportunity? Is there something that I could bring into this conversation, right? Or beyond yourself, thinking about, is that only you stuck in this situation? Can you asking for help from others? And also in relationship to other events, right? But rarely anything is kind of standalone. Most of the things that we're talking about today is relative. So thinking about, is there something, other events and situation you can bring into the situation to unlock the resources that you might be need and as a critical breaking through point. And this is also a very similar idea as reframing. Okay, reframing is define a situation of yourself. That's framing. Reframing is through question can be most effective way to reframe and to enlarge the frame, right? So it's a very similar concept is this person is putting himself or herself into the frame. Your job is to reframe it to become a much larger frame. Therefore, you have more resources to obtain. So I wanted to give some reframing examples just to help you to thinking through this. The first example is we already talked about the strengths profile, right? This is a great opportunity for you to reframe and gain energy. We have talked about earlier that by reframing, by utilizing more of your strengths, you gain more energy. So you energize yourself by practicing more strength, right? But the key, one of the strategy you have to be aware is, the key is overuse your strengths could also potentially harm you, because the strengths overused maybe turns into a weakness of yours. So you have to practice more than 4 strengths to avoid overusing any particular one. So it's a balancing act. When you have 4 strengths to use at the same time, it's really hard to overuse it. The second strategy is to practice using strengths to overcome your weakness. What's the benefit of that? because now you minimize using your weakness and you utilize more of your strength. That's going to boost your energy. So reframing, utilizing strength profile is a perfect opportunity to gain energy, which is important because most of the time, if you are the one trying to solve the problem, you need to maintain the right energy level in order to proceed. Another examples are, I call it emotional connection. This is a personal example and personal story. I was shopping actually in shopping malls, and I saw this jacket. Okay, this jacket come with different color, but I don't like any of those color. This is one of them. So I was like, oh, I don't really like purple. I probably never going to wear purple color. So, but then one of the shopping assistant came to me, say, well, have you seen this jacket have another color? I'm like, which color? She said, lavender. I was like, oh, I love lavender. Right? It's such a creative approach. Because she said that, I all of a sudden has this image of beautiful lavender field in my mind, and I decided to buy this jacket. So I hanging this jacket in my closet because oftentimes it reminded me about the power of reframing. It is the same color, right? It's the same jacket, but it changed my mind. So emotional reframing is often a psychology technique. And it triggers, especially in those negative emotions. So it will encourage the individuals to adopt a more positive and neutral perspective. And this can reduce emotional distress, right? And it promote resilience. So thinking about a creative approach, if you would have, is there something, emotion, in connection you are able to make to influence your audience? And another powerful one to reframe is from negative to positive. And it's inevitable. We oftentimes get ourselves into a problem, into a negative situation. But what we can do about it is asking those questions. What good can come from this? What lessons can I apply from this to my future? Or what skills or strengths did I develop from this? This is powerful because positive thinking brings a lot more hope, energy, and resilience for us to taking through this problem solving. So those are the step 1 and step 2. We're moving on to step 3, assuming that you know the other side very well. You have assessed your resource situation. You have tried to unlock those resources by reaching out to other people, by connecting the situation to other relevant events. And then you have tried the strategy of reframing, right? Here comes the third step, matchmaking, is knowing what's important to you, what's important to them, what you can give, and what you must have, right? And how to form a win-win partnership. Win-win partnership has to starting with a win-win mindset, and it's a give and take relationship. What can you give? What can you take? And finally, if you understand all above, this is an analysis of cost and value, right? So cost-benefit analysis. What I want to emphasize here is a p-value. P-value represent for perceived value. So what's important to you might not be necessarily important to others. For example, coffee might be very important for me in the morning. I could not move on my day without a coffee. But, coffee is not for everyone. Somebody would feel like coffee is useless for them, right? So perceived value is very different. Yes, I would have, spend $10 to buy a cup of coffee, but some people are not even willing to spend 25 cents because it's no value for them. So it is a balance act. Come to this point is based on the cost and benefit analysis, you want to find a sweet spot that has highest perspective value, but costs you the least, right? That's where you wanted to make this exchange and to form to successfully influence and form a partnership. So after all this analysis, you basically trying to answer the potential why. But how do you actually execute to make this influence a successful journey? I would like to introduce you to the 3 circles of influence, right? We actually talked about the first circle. So now is the point that you're ready to take action. You want to execute your plan, right? So the question comes, Are you the right person? Do you have the right credibility to take that action, try to make this influence a successful one? Should you look into some other people in your network? Are they better? Are they a better candidate to take that particular action? Should you look into that particular environment, the culture, the social element, we just talked about it, and is there a certain norm or differences between that environment versus what you use to environment? How should you execute your plan, right? So that's what we call like 3 circle of influence is, in addition to you, there's other people, the people that you are within the same group. There's also a larger societal culture element to it. And this brings us to the influence framework. So first step, perspective taking, understanding where they come from. Secondly, reframing, unlock the resources. And third one, try to do a good matchmaking, understand what you can give, what they can take, and then do a good value exchange based on a cost-effective analysis. And then thinking about your network, thinking about environment in general, thinking about what's the best way to the strategy you wanted to take action to ensure the success. So the first half is really trying to answer why. The second half is really trying to answer how. And high performance leaders get things done. They convince and motivate people by explaining why. And they execute and utilize their resources beyond themselves. So leaders always translate vision to reality. I love this quote. A person can have the greatest ideas in the world, completely different and novel. But if that person cannot convince enough other people, it doesn't matter. And I feel like I have a network. There's no shortage of people, a talent, smart ideas. They're all smarter than me, but not necessarily people view every one of them as a leader, right? Leader clearly differentiate themselves by the ability to translate the vision to reality, also be able to influence the audience. This brings us to the next module, leadership intelligence. So this is a time we will bring all together. We talked about a personal intelligence, talk about cultural intelligence, as well as social intelligence. And I want to encourage you to think of your life as a house. So you as an individual, you as a group member, you as a society member, and in some situation, we're also the leader of that group, right? But the question comes, can you knock down the wall between the rooms and be the same person in each one? So there is no standard answer, right? Maybe you are the same person in each room. Maybe not. Maybe part of you stay consistent internally, but appear to be a different person outside. The key is to build trust, stay confident, and perform consistently as the best version of yourself for a very long time. So this is a moment for you to reflect and try to build a house you want. My advice is to start building the house of intelligence. Has a solid foundation of personal intelligence. Utilize your strengths. It has a culture influence to guide you through cross-cultural situation. It also has this element of social intelligence, mainly try to utilize the power of influence. And then here comes the leadership intelligence. And authenticity is important because only you stay true to yourself, then you have the resilience to take you through the career advancement, right? And we're a supply chain person here, so I would love to do this. Is all of the personal, culture, social intelligence are the input for you to become a good leader, right? Those build a solid foundation, and everything working progress is a practice. And then finally, the outcome will be obvious, whether you're able to solve a problem, whether you're able to advance your career, whether people view you as a good leader. I love this quote. Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. So building the house of intelligence is hard, but it can be very, very rewarding when it actually advances your career and improve quality of your life. It is also a lifelong journey. So start today. So this is what I call it leading with emotional intelligence. Where do we begin? We always start with ourselves. So self-leadership is important in the realm of leadership. I love this quote by an Asian philosopher: mastering self, others is strength, but mastering yourself is a true power. I would end today's presentation by sharing a metaphor. So you see a lot of lotus, right? You may be wondering about why did I even use that for today's presentation. So imagine a lotus pond. There's many of them out there, but only a few lotus flowers bloom on the first day. The number of blooming flowers doubles each day compared to the previous day. By the 30th day, a month, the entire pond is filled with beautiful lotus flowers. If you're wondering when half of the lotus flower will bloom, and many of us thinking, oh, it might be the day 15, right, middle of the month. That's not right. It's actually on day 29. And this phenomenon is known as the lotus law. So the power of nature have taught us success requires sustained effort and accumulation. And this perfectly applied to soft skills because it is a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong learning. And the earlier you start, the better would help you. And if you're interested in courses like this, talks like this, I would encourage you to check out our nonprofit, Oceanside Perspective. It is a learning educational organization, and we are a content company. We produce a lot of content under the framework of LITE, so leadership, innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. We view this as our learning framework. I have the website here. You're also welcome to find us on LinkedIn and all other social media. Check out our content, and we will release a lot more content in the near future. So that concluded my presentation. And thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks for learning with me together.